Okay. So it's 8:01 and I will get started by introducing myself and going over a few housekeeping items. So welcome. My name is Erin McGuirl. I am the executive director of the Bibliographical Society of America, and we're really pleased to have Charlotte Priddle and Heather O'Donnell with us tonight for our first, hopefully, Candid Conversations series. A couple of notes. One, if you're on our email list, you would have seen that the BSA just published our first code. Well, not our first. It is our first, but it is our code of conduct. And we do expect you to follow these guidelines when you participate in this event. So I've put a link to the policy in the chat and you can look it over if you'd like to. Also, we have a live captioner, you may have noticed, providing closed captioning in English. There is also an option to have the English captions translated into Spanish, and I'm putting the link to that in the chat right now. So click there and a new window will open up in your browser, and just select Spanish from the drop-down menu, and then you'll see all of those captions in Spanish as we're going along. Third, this event is informal, and I want to really sort of stress here that BSA is hosting this. A co-sponsor of this event is not the ABAA and is not NYU. So despite the fact that we have an ABAA bookseller here and an NYU librarian, we are really presenting their personal perspectives. And we are really delighted that they're willing to be here and share those with us. And we want to invite you also, as many of you are booksellers and librarians yourselves, to share your perspectives in the chat as we're going along. We really want this to be a conversation, and we hope that you'll participate both by sharing your thoughts and experiences in the chat and by using the Q&A feature to submit your questions. So you can pose questions anonymously, and we want you to do that, especially if there's something that you feel a little uncomfortable asking and sort of being known that it is you asking that question. This is a forum where you can feel safe to ask something that you feel might be not, something you should maybe already know. So there's a feature activated in the Q&A that allows you to tick a box that says ask anonymously. And something I'll also ask you to do if you're keeping an eye on the Q&A box is to upvote questions that are interesting to you. So you can give, keep an eye on the questions that are coming in, give the ones that are interesting to you a thumbs up. And that will help us keep an eye on the questions and answer those that are of greatest interest to the crowd. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guests. Heather O'Donnell runs Honey Wax Booksellers in Brooklyn, specializing in literary and cultural history. She received a BA from Columbia University and a PhD from Yale, and has worked as a rare book dealer since 2004. She's co-founder of the Honey Wax Book Collecting Prize, an annual award for an outstanding book collection built by a young woman in the United States, and a founding member of the ABAA Women's Initiative. Heather serves on the ABAA Board of Governors and the faculty of the Colorado Antiquarian Book Seminar, and is featured in The Booksellers, the 2019 documentary on the New York book trade. Charlotte Priddle is also with us tonight. She is the Director of Special Collections at New York University. Prior to her current position, she was librarian for printed books at the Fales Library and Special Collections, also at NYU. She has an MLIS from Rutgers University and an MA and a BA from the University of Sussex in the UK. She co-taught the seminar From Papyri to PDF, an Introduction to Book History Now in the English department at NYU for 5 years, and currently serves on the scholarship committee for RBMS. Her published articles have appeared in various academic journals, including College and Research Libraries, RBM, and Libraries, Culture, History, and Society. So that's all I have to say. I will now turn it over to Charlotte and Heather. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hello, everyone. It's great to, that everybody came out in this election week. If any states declare during this hour, put it in the chat because we don't have our phones. So, we'd like to know, but I hope that the next hour can be kind of a break for what I think for most of us has been a lot of anxious scrolling over the past few days. So this is the first in a proposed Candid Conversation series from the BSA. And this series is based on the proposition that there are lots of different groups that make up the rare book ecosystem in which most of us live and work. There are librarians and booksellers who, of course, are here tonight. But also collectors and archivists and teachers, bibliographers, auctioneers, scholars, conservators, journalists. This is a series aimed at better understanding the work of our rare book adjacent colleagues in the field and encouraging more communication and better collaboration between groups. And so tonight is the first focused on rare book dealers, which I will be representing, and special collections librarians. I give you Charlotte. The questions that we're asking tonight were drawn from the anonymous BSA poll that many of you responded to, and also direct questions that were sent to me and Charlotte over the course of the past couple of months. Just to underscore what Erin said, we're speaking candidly from our own experience and not attempting to represent large monolithic institutional points of view or best practices. This is really just about us talking about how we do our jobs and the questions that come up and what makes things easier for us and what makes things harder. And so I am going to pose Charlotte is going to pose the first question of the night.
I am indeed. So Heather, the first question is, as a librarian, what's the most effective way for me to share my institution's collecting interests with the trade? And how do I seek out booksellers who might share those interests or be able to help me?
Well, the first thing I would say is that booksellers are always really eager to hear from librarians about their collecting interests and what they're working on. And booksellers are also, myself included, notoriously bad at retaining that information in an effective way. And so I would say that, one of the best things that you can do, because the usual circumstances in which this occurs is a book fair, and we're going to be talking a lot about book fairs tonight, even though we're not actually going to any right now. But that is the arena in which booksellers and librarians most frequently and intensely encounter each other. At any book fair, there are any number of librarians coming through the booth telling me about their projects, and I do earnestly try to take notes and to recall. But as we all know, at the end of a book fair, you can barely recall who you are, much less who anyone else is, and you may have seized on one particular word or concept that someone mentioned, but have kind of forgotten the parameters of the specific requirements of this collection. And so one thing I would say that was super helpful for me was a couple years ago at the Armory, when a librarian with whom I'd done some business online but had never met in person came by to introduce herself, which was great, and also handed me a handout of what she collects and basically what her collecting priorities are. That was genius. It's the most low-tech thing, but I still have it right there, on my desk. And I look at it when I'm looking at things, thinking would this be appropriate for their collections? And now I can see what the chronological, parameters are of the collection. And, they're not interested in periodicals, so that would not be something to pick, that kind of thing. That's really helpful. I would also say, don't be afraid to just repeat yourself over and over and over again to booksellers. Even if you feel like you're being annoying, you're not. We just don't retain anything. So it's really helpful just to remember that person is always looking out for this particular writer or books from this particular person's library or something like that. That really helps. In terms of finding booksellers who would be good to work with, in the same way that I don't send catalogs to every single university librarian in the country, but instead focus on ones who I think, realistically might ever want to buy anything that I sell. Librarians have the opportunity when they have a free moment, which I know are not so many, to look very small, to identify the booksellers who are consistently showing material that is right for the collections that you're building. And I would say, one thing, you can do, of course, a search on abaa.org by subject matter, which definitely helps. If you need maritime books, why not just, go to the people who literally that is their whole business. But it's also true that, often it's not quite that cut and dried. You're looking for lots of things. If you find a bookseller, if you at a fair or through the Ex Libris list or through catalogs, or by searching online, who seems to share the sensibility of yourself and your collection and what you're trying to do, and seems like they could be helpful, I would definitely keep a short list of them, reach out to them, write them periodically, reminding them of what you collect. I know it's a lot of work, and it feels like, why should you have to reach out? But I think that actually those librarians who kind of make a little bit of an effort to get themselves on the radar of booksellers who are often quite frazzled have better luck in terms of having the right material sourced to them, which then makes their lives a lot easier because they're not trying to, reinvent the wheel every single day of their life. Now I'm going to pitch you a question for Charlotte. What is the best way for a bookseller to approach a librarian if I have a book that might be right for your collection? How should I let you know about that? And if I don't hear back from you, should I bother following up?
Yes. Yes, you should. I think it's similar to what you just said, Heather, but from a different point of view. So obviously, sometimes you've already got relationships with dealers through looking at their catalogs, through them sending you stuff. Sometimes you inherit a bunch of, speaking from my own experience, I took over the role from somebody else. So I already had, a bunch of kind of catalogs coming in from all over the place. And so you already kind of have a sense of the sort of ecosystem, as you said, around it, but you actually don't, you can buy stuff from these people and you meet them at a book fair, right? So, so that's a kind of portion maybe of the world that you already know. And then there's all of these people that haven't sent you anything, didn't send your predecessor anything. And so if you're thinking about somebody just randomly sending me something, I think the best way, if you're doing it virtually, is literally just to reach out, introduce yourself, say, hey, I think, as you said, understanding a little bit about the collections that are already there so that you can say, hey, I see that you have X kinds of things, right? I have Y book. I've had a look in your catalog. You don't seem to have it. Would you be interested? These are the kind of materials I deal in. You can kind of lead it in as much as you've already done a little bit of the legwork. It's not something that's just, coming in completely from left field. I do think follow-up is a good idea. I know it can be onerous on the bookseller, but, speaking from my point of view and knowing that I do still do acquisitions as well as everything else that's going on, and especially in this world, it can also be difficult for people to, we all know the dirty secret of special collections, which is there's also always massive swathes of our collections that aren't necessarily fully catalogued or as catalogued as we would like them to be. So oftentimes for me, and I'm sure any of the booksellers who are on this, who have had to deal with me in the past, know that one of the things I often say is, I need to get to the stacks and see if we have that, because we may well do, because it may not be catalogued, right? Or it could be catalogued wrongly, or there's something different about the copy that I'm being offered, which I'm not 100% sure mine has. So that in itself builds in a delay, right? And so I think, a follow-up, even if it's a re-forward of the email, just following up on this, no rush is fine. It's a totally legitimate thing to do. And I think for each seller on the other side, they have to have their own kind of limit of, okay, I did that. I waited a week. I followed up. I didn't hear anything. Okay. Either something's going on or they're just, I'll move on to, whoever else or whatever else. But I do think that a follow-up can be good, because it's happened to me where I've been like, oh, you know, that does sound really interesting. I'm going to leave it unopened in the top of my email so I can get to the stacks in an hour when I've got that like moment free in my day. And then I get a leak coming through the ceiling. Not that happened today or anything like that. And that whole period of time that I had carved out to do this something else gets thrown on top of it. And then it's the next day and the next day and the next day. I mean, and that's the nature of our lives, and especially as librarians, that, you know, often the thing that you think may only take a couple of minutes ends up taking 3 hours, right? So, but I think, you know, from the bookseller, you just need to set a parameter and say, yeah, if I don't hear in X amount of days, I'll follow up. And then if I don't hear, okay, that's fine. You know, it's often not because we're just like, because really, I mean, if I don't want something, I'll say, hey, that's great. I don't think it's for us. Thanks very much. But if it's something I'm really thinking about, you know, sometimes it's going to take me a little bit longer.
Can I jump in with a quick follow-up question to that? So Heather, is there, I'm the moderator. Heather, is there an etiquette issue with follow-up? I'm thinking, you know, if you've made an offer to a librarian and it sits there, are you holding that book thinking, oh, I've offered it to so-and-so, I don't want to offer it to someone else again? So is there any sort of etiquette with follow-up that maybe some new folks might want to be aware of?
I mean, for myself, it depends, honestly. If I'm writing to a librarian with whom I've done business in the past and I'm offering a book, I will typically, you know, hold on to it for, you know, not offer it to anyone else and wait for a response. And then I will follow up briefly just to say, like, just, you know, nudging this to the top of your inbox, but I totally understand if it's not right, and then move on. If I'm writing someone I've never written before and they don't write back to me, my assumption is just they're not going to, which may be unfair, but I'm just conscious of how much email I get every day. And I know librarians get just as much, if not more. And, you know, I'm constantly being offered books. And if it seems like they've made, I guess, you know, if it seems like they've made an effort to get to know me and the kind of thing I buy, I will always try to respond. But I also get a lot of offers that are kind of just like Hail Mary, you know, like, I have these books, do you want them? In which case, like, I don't feel particularly, you know, like I need to carve time out of my day to like write a response to someone who didn't even bother to learn my name. When I'm writing someone who I don't know about a book that I don't know if they have, you know, I've checked OCLC or whatever, they don't seem to have it, but like, I don't really know, and they don't write back. Sometimes I'll follow up, but sometimes I'll just, you know, I'll just move on. I mean, it's a tricky thing, because of course, if someone comes back to you later and it's like, hey, the book, and you sold it, you know, you do feel like, oh my goodness. But I feel like, I don't know, after a few days, if I haven't heard anything, I assume that at minimum, it's not at the top of anyone's list, and, you know, people are not going to be, usually if people really want something, they respond within a day or two to say, like, put it on hold, or let's talk about it, or something like that. But it's kind of a you know, I mean, I wish that there were a rule, right? I wish there were like a standard, like 48 hours and then you are free, but that's not really the case. And everything is so mediated in this world between relationships. Like, I might hold it for 2 weeks for a librarian who I love, who I know is like a little bit flaky and like sometimes takes a really long time, but then does like things, you know, and for someone else, I might feel like I have to give the courtesy of this because of that collection, but I don't have to hold it any longer past that.
Well, I'm glad we sort of addressed that, because I feel like it is kind of a two-sided issue, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everybody, you know, is trying to do right by everybody else. I think another thing about this whole relationship is that everyone has to be able to accept no gracefully, right? I mean, at some point, you know, like,
that was
booksellers
the question you
time,
received,
right?
right?
Like offering books and you know, them just not sticking. You know, you can't take it personally, but you also then have to be prepared to keep rolling, you know, and keep moving to place the book. So
But then I think, Heather, that's the same from our point of view, is that you know, you as a, you know, from my side, I also have to be willing. So say, you know, you do send that thing, and I don't respond in a couple of days because something's going on, and then I get back to you maybe, 4 days later, and I'm like, hey, that book, and you're like, I'm really sorry. I also have to be willing to be like, that's on me, right? Because I could have emailed back and been like, Heather, this sounds really interesting. I need to do a couple of things. Can you hold it for me? And make that thing. Can you hold it for me for 48 hours? Giving myself that time and you that time to understand, right? Sort of what's going on. So it's a two-way street, and it is a sort of relationship, and you have to be open from that point of view. But if I don't do that, even if I don't have time to run to the stacks and see it, if I can just say, can you just give me this little bit of extra time because I am interested in it, I also have to be willing to be like, that was me, that's on me, I lost that, right? And I think that's just the way that you have to, that from a librarian point of view, I have to be able to operate.
And I think that it's totally fine also when when I offer a book to say, I'm going to hold this through the end of the week. And, if I don't hear back, I'll assume it's not of interest. Except that sometimes when writing to someone that I don't know that well, there's something about that deadline that feels a little bit like you have 72 hours to do it, and it feels like, well, who am I to be giving like total strangers, like whatever, like, I'm letting you know that I have this thing. I thought you might like it. If that's the case, get back to me,
Yeah.
So one question just came in, and that's if a library wants a bookseller to hold a book while they decide, what's the appropriate length of time to ask for the hold?
That's a really good one. I mean, I would say, again, there's no absolutely, standard period of time, but I think that probably what most booksellers would like, librarians to understand is that for most of us, we work on pretty tight margins and we have to keep things moving. And so to ask someone to put an expensive book on hold for 2-3 weeks, which then kind of, while like it goes, sort of gets knocked farther and farther down the queue of the to-do list, like that puts a small bookseller in a really bad position. And is very hard, especially if they're trying very hard to retain the goodwill of this institution and they want to be accommodating, but they can't just lock up, the inventory indefinitely. I mean, I certainly don't mind putting things on hold for institutions, but I would say if I haven't heard back in I don't know, if I haven't heard back in a week, I'll probably send like a little, just like, is this still, something you're interested in? I would probably nudge every week. And then usually it doesn't take that long because actually people usually do at that point say like, yes, we want it, or you can sell elsewhere or whatever, or maybe we'll come back at the end of this fiscal year if we have the money, but don't hold it, or, whatever, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I think that leads nicely into a question you had for me, Heather, about budget cycles.
Oh yeah, that is very true. Some librarians, Charlotte, are very open about their budget cycle and acquisitions process, but some are not. Some librarians, I know everything about their life. Other librarians, very, very closed mouth. So is it okay for a bookseller to ask for details of your budget, your fiscal year, your process in terms of acquisitions, or is that overstepping? What do you think that is there? How transparent can anyone expect that to be?
Well, again, I think it depends if you're doing this like, first time and it's like, so how much money do you have and when do you spend it? Might be a little bit, not the thing to do the first time you're meeting with somebody or the first time you're talking with somebody. Never ask anyone their age or how much money they earn, right? Isn't that the rule? So, I mean, you can kind of play that around in the librarian bookseller world and still kind of holds true. Having said that, I think once you can lead those into, if you're having conversations, especially if you've offered something to somebody or they've said, and if the librarian opens up and is like, look, normally I would love it, but, my budget year just started. This is a big ticket item. I need to stretch my budget for, the next 12 months. So I'm not going to do it now, but, if it's still available as time goes on, can you keep me posted? You don't have to tell me if it goes somewhere specific, you don't have to tell me where it goes, but if it is still available, just keep me keep me posted on that, because I know, speaking purely for myself, I do have that mindset. The cycle that our budget runs on, it can be different in different institutions. Ours happens to run, full disclosure, on an academic year. So if somebody offers me something on September 9th and it's a really big ticket, it wouldn't behoove me to say, sure, I'm going to go for it right now, knowing that, in the normal times, I would have, the Brooklyn Fair, the Boston Fair, the New York Fair, the California Fair, and the London Fairs all coming up. And I knowing the cycle of how booksellers work, the way that things, bubble up and follow that kind of pattern. I don't want to be stuck, in March or April or May with things that have been, saved and are put forward or have changed hands, or however it works in that ecosystem, pushed forward for the New York or the London fairs, and to realize that, I just don't have the money. So I tend to be, and have been, kind of quite upfront about that, I think. And similarly, I also know if somebody offers me something in July, I've probably got about this much left, right? And so I will say, hey, I would love it. I can't pay you until my budget starts next year. Are you okay with that? Because I think that's, it's just to be upfront, and then it gives the bookseller the opportunity to say, I really can't, or say, sure, that's fine, so long as you really want it. So I think that, it depends what you're asking for. I think asking for individual dollar amounts on a budget, I wouldn't answer that question. I would offer what I had specific budgets for, and some of the budgets I had are very, very specific. You can only acquire X amount, X subject things with this, with this fund. I will say, hey, I have a fund where I can only buy, books about Wellington boots. I don't, but I'm just making that up.
Yeah, but
do you have anything on Wellington boots? Because I've got to spend this. Or characters that wear Wellington boots. And yes, I already have Paddington. So those kind of things you can be pretty specific about, because then you're trying to get into a relationship with someone who've been like, please help me out with these things. And it does mean that always that you can keep those kind of things kind of ticking over, because people will offer you stuff knowing that you have this Wellington boot fund that you have to spend down every year. And I'm sure you could get super creative with it. So I think that general kind of questions around it can be posed once you've kind of got past the initial part of the relationship. And I do think, a librarian can offer that up, because it also gives them, I should imagine, the bookseller a sense of, oh, okay, we're kind of getting to a little bit more of the nitty gritty now. And now I understand, if I get this thing in July, Charlotte's probably not going to have the money for it, and I can get into that conversation with her. So I think again, you can do it. You just have to be respectful around the way that you do it, and, it's also an understanding of, where does this person come from? Are they in a public institution? Are they in a private institution? And these things can often operate very differently in terms of the process by which people have to get things passed. Does it have to be approved by another committee? All of these kind of questions can really differ from institution to institution. So a lot of that comes from those relationships and that conversation that you have about understanding and being able to share as a librarian. This isn't for me, I need to go through an extra level of approval for this because it's over X amount. So can you bear with me? And it, the onus is on us, I think, at that point of view, if we know that there's that extra level, to be able to be transparent about that and say, this is what I have to go through. It's going to take 2 weeks to get an answer. Is that okay? So, I mean, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, I feel like transparency, without, feeling like you have to, expose every detail of your life. As much as, I think that, in a properly functioning ecosystem, special collections librarians and rare book dealers are on the same team, right? I mean, there are people who care about the same material, who have similar goals. They want to move this material to a good home. They want to keep it, you know, get it to the right place. And what sometimes, you know, gums up that relationship is this sense of mistrust, or like, are they trying to take me? Are they like, do they disrespect me? Are they just not even telling me what's happening? Like, I don't even know what's really going on. And so anything that either side can do, I think, just to be really clear. I mean, I, for instance, do not mind it at all when people are like, can you explain your pricing on this or whatever, you know, because like, I think it's interesting, but I don't understand how you came to this. Like, I am prepared to do that for every single book that I have, because I work really hard in thinking about what is a fair price for this specific copy and why that is. And I'm happy to walk through that instead of having it just be like, well, I saw one at auction that was cheaper, so like, you must be a crook. Right, which is like not true actually, and so it's I feel like that kind of transparency on both sides, and also, you know, trust on both sides, like wanting to understand where the other person is coming from, what they need to do, you know, whether that is a bookseller saying like, this book is on consignment from someone, you know, who has a very strict limit on what they will sell it for, and I don't have the authority to just price it however I want, even though I would like to for you. Like, I cannot do that. Just as the librarian can say, much as I would love to pull the trigger on this right now, I am not the person who's going to write the check for this. So you're going to, you know, there's going to be a meeting on Wednesday and we're going to discuss it, and I will let you know how that goes or whatever.
There have been a bunch of questions coming in, and I'm going to try to sort of tack a couple on to what has been discussed just recently. So I think maybe for both of you, for Charlotte, I think especially, what is the role of, here we go. What is the role of directors of research institutions and college or university libraries? Because I think we've been talking a lot about librarians and curators here. Someone also asked a question about faculty and the roles that they can play in acquisition, like can they subsidize a purchase? And this question was for you, Heather. Would you reserve the sale of a title in a situation giving like delays around this? And then I think if in this discussion we can address just how to say no is something that I think is so very important, because we haven't actually done that yet, and I think that people do want to know how you say no.
Okay, so Erin, correct, like, let me know if I don't answer the questions properly, because you know I have a tendency to ramble, especially as I've had a margarita. So, or I'm halfway through one anyway. The role of directors of research institutions, college or university librarians, it varies from institution to institution, to be honest. I mean, I'm the director of special collections, but that's just my institution. And as I said, private universities in the public service and public universities can operate in very, very different ways. I mean, we have different budget structures. I'm sure, you know, there's the difference of endowed funds, restricted funds, you know, there's a whole gamut of things that can differ. And a lot of it is going to depend on the size of the institution, the role of the director of the research institution, basically the hierarchy and the organization of where special collections fits within the libraries itself, within that unit. Is it a freestanding kind of institution, research institution of itself? Does it fit in as a unit within the libraries? How kind of, you know, does it operate basically as kind of its own sort of body, and everybody kind of leaves it alone? So this really depends. There's no kind of universal across the board. Having said that, sometimes I do think you know, you do need to be involved and have a good relationship with your dean or your, you know, university librarian, whatever the hierarchy is, because there are often going to be times when you have to make a call about something, and you have to be able to justify why you're saying, yes, I know I have all these funds, but this thing is something that I need help with, and we need to tap money from elsewhere. And it's my job then to justify why I should be taking money from somewhere else, right? And so You know, I think it really does depend on where you work, who you work with, and what that relationship is, and how much your university or your library hierarchy and administration understand about the work of what special collections does. And that can vary too, depending on histories and personalities and all that kind of stuff. And that's the other part of the librarian's job, right? It also you know, curators is a term, and it's a role that gets kind of bandied about, but it means different things in different places. And I think that's something to be aware of. You know, where I am, you know, I'm the curator for printed books. I'm the director of the department, and, you know, and today you would have found me, you know, like moving books because we had a leak on the floor. Don't tell anyone, you know, not on my floor, but in another floor of the library. So, you know, I'm not going to say, you know, different institutions have different models of how people work and how departments fit together and what those roles are. And sometimes the role is just one thing, or it can be a multiplicity of things. So there's only really one size fits all. And I think part of, unfortunately, the onus on a bookseller then is trying to find out from the librarian that they have that contact with what the rest of that structure looks like, and maybe who has the ultimate yes or no, you know, who has the deep pockets, you know, and who it is that actually gets to get that wallet out.
What's that like for you, Heather?
I mean, I would say that I would actually move just to the next part of the question you posed about faculty and faculty's role in bringing materials in from booksellers. I have occasionally had faculty members who do, like, either they have research budgets that enable them to just buy the books for themselves, or somehow through the library, you know, that they can somehow get their institution to foot the bill for stuff. I would say that what's much more common, though, I mean, outside of that handful of cases where you have fairly high profile faculty who just can actually direct acquisitions to some degree because they have funds at their disposal, I definitely do try, when I am cataloging, you know, certain things, to imagine, to present, when I'm quoting them to the librarian, with the language that I think they would use to the faculty about what I am suggesting. Like, this is a teaching collection, and here is what it enables you to see. So that if the librarian is, like, you know, going through like 10 billion emails, if they see that one and it's like, here is the pitch, a collection of 12 items on Moll Flanders, showing the way that character was received in popular English, you know, slip songs, broadsides, and chapbooks of the, you know, first half of the 19th century. A material of ephemera, you don't have any of it in the library. Of course, you do have Moll Flanders, but would any of the faculty who teach the 18th century novel be interested in having their seminar, you know, take a look at this material and think about it? That kind of thing is, I think, helpful for librarians in that they know who the faculty member is, who, you know, the short list, and can quickly just ask them, like, do you want this? Would this be helpful? And if people are like, yes, it would be, then that's, you know, another thing in the, you know, another reason for them to make, you know, devote part of the budget to that. I definitely try to think about what would make, as opposed to a private collector, what might be appealing for an institution about an individual item. Because there are lots of items that are not really suited for private collectors as much as, you know, it's like this particular copy is not really a collector's copy, but it could totally be a scholar's copy because of this thing about it, these annotations or this weird extra illustration. You know, it's something, it tells you something different. And it might be better suited for someone's seminar table. You know, that's where it might actually find its greatest life. So I try to, if I can, like, just propose that scenario to when I'm quoting the book, to make librarians' lives easier.
I think you bring up a really interesting point there, though, you know, when thinking of the question of faculty, it's also like that remembrance that a lot of the librarians teach too, right? And so a lot of what my mind is thinking when I'm looking for things is not just, do we have it, you know, but also, how am I going to use it, right? What is the use that this thing could have? That it's not just kind of like, well, we've got all the other titles by X author and we didn't have that one, and ooh, I found it, which is great. You know, you can use that, absolutely. And that's not to denigrate that at all, but also kind of thinking of what is this unusual thing that intrigues me, you know, how can I use it? Because sometimes what will happen is you will be presented with a thing that, yes, in theory should really fit in your collection, but it just, you're like, we have several exemplars of something like this. I don't necessarily need another one. Or people will say to me, Charlotte, why did you buy that? You know, like, you don't. And I'm like, because I can use it in this way, in this way, in this way.
So
And I
hot
think
tip for the bookseller, check the course listings for the curators' names to see what classes they're teaching semester to semester.
I would not like stalk librarians, and you know, like, that is, you know, but yeah, if you can find out, sure. I mean, I think, you know,
have that conversation. I mean,
yeah,
Heather,
talk to them about it, you know, when you see them. But I think this also goes back to, you know, how do you say no? I mean, the truth is that sometimes I pitch a book to a librarian and it seems like it's a perfect fit for the collection, and they will concede that it is a perfect fit for the collection, but they just are not feeling that book.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a hard blow, but it is also like, I would prefer to know. I am always, you know, I would always, one of the questions actually was, what's the best way, the most helpful or polite way a librarian can say no to a bookseller's offer? I mean, I would say that, you know, if you're saying no, you're already ahead of so many librarians because you've at least responded to the quote. So I'm grateful that I've heard something back and don't have to like wonder if like I should hold on for another 48 hours. But it's also the case that it's the best way that, you know, to say no is also to give some information about why the no. And that can be, you know, I know it looks like we don't have it when you look online, but actually it's present in this other collection that we have, so I don't need it. That tells me something, like you were on the right track, but they actually already had it, so okay. Or you know, we don't handle things that are continental. We only do English stuff for this, so we're just, it's an Italian book is not appropriate, no matter how like seemingly on task it is or whatever. Or you know, that like, I just don't feel it. I mean, the truth is, as a bookseller, I'm offered books all the time. And sometimes I feel like this is a really nice copy of a nice book, but it's not sparking joy for me really. And I would rather buy something more challenging, or buy, you know, I can only do so much, and I can only buy so much. And sometimes things just don't hit. And, you know, you can always, there is no shame in coming back later, you know, and saying like, I know I passed on that at the New York Fair, but you still have it. Like, I'm never offended. And I'm also never like gloating and exultant and like, I told you so. I mean, I'm just happy that, you know, okay, that book stayed with you and maybe it is a little bit like more suited for the collection that you saw. Fine, like just get back in touch if you know, or say, I'd like to see another one if you see one, that kind of thing. I mean, we're all looking at so much material all the time. And we're having necessarily to make decisions. And sometimes you think back on a decision and you think, oh, I wish I'd bought that. Or, you know.
So also, we only have 15 minutes left. Okay. And I'm gonna pose one question that's been asked twice. And I think this is actually a really good one. And it's for people who are at small institutions or institutions that are not located near a book fair. How do you build those relationships with booksellers, and, you know, vice versa too, I think to some degree?
Well, I mean,
oh, sorry, go on.
Okay. So when I first started in this world, special collections world, where did I start? It was a good year until I went to my first book fair, you know, and I was stepping into a role that had been empty for a while, but with, you know, the collections that I worked with had very strong personalities, you know, attached to them, and people kind of, you know, associated certain types of collecting with the Fales Library and Special Collections, you know. And so, you know, stepping into a role like that was, you know, I had to make all of these relationships, you know, but I didn't go to the first New York Book Fair. You know, I started, I think, in February, and it would have been March or April, and I didn't go, thank God. But, you know, so a lot of it was taking that time to get to know my collection and thinking about my collection, you know, the collections, and thinking about what I saw in them, what I didn't see in them, what I wanted to think about with them. So kind of a lot of absorbing of what the material that was already there. But then it was also, you know, those catalogs that were still being sent to me, and, you know, and then going to those websites for those catalogs that were sent. And then for others too, looking back at some of the invoices from the previous year of what had been bought, and going to those sort of websites and getting a sense of what the entire world was. We have very, very broad collecting remits, you know, and so, which in some great ways is fantastic, and in other ways really difficult, right? Especially when you're first starting out. And so, you know, I didn't have that immediately, oh, I'll just go to the book fair and meet all of these people in person. So a lot of it was over email. You ask a question, and as a librarian, you can reach out and you can see that thing in a catalog, and you're going to have to email them or call them and say, hey, hi, I don't know if we've bought from you before, or I'm the new so-and-so, or, you know, I think you may have known my predecessor, or whatever it is, the opening gambit. I'm really interested in number X from catalog Y. I'm just seeing if it's still available. Could you tell me a little bit more about it? You know, and you'll either get the, I'm sorry, it's sold, you know, one line, or you get the, I'm sorry, it's sold. Are there other things that you might be interested in? Oh, I used to work with blah, blah, you know, and so you can start that conversation that way, right? And some people I've still never met in kind of the 10 years that I've been doing this, because they don't necessarily travel to the fairs either, you know? Or conversely, I've met them, you know, at a fair, at a smaller fair, at the PBFA fair, you know, and that's the only time I'll ever see these people, you know, and it's purely like what they have in front of them. So it's not necessarily just because you can't travel to a fair, or you're not in, you know, a big city or whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you can't build those relationships, because let's be honest, we're all in this world now, this virtual world, and we have to be able to build these relationships this way anyway. You know, fairs are one thing, but the fairs became easier for me simply because I'd already made those relationships with people and had got into that back and forth over email, you know, and you can interpret the emails that you have to say very formally with, and then you can interpret the ones where you can get a little more human with them, you know, and that's how you build those relationships, because when push comes to shove, it is a relationship. And so that's about when you connect as, you know, and some people it's always very formal, and other people it's not, you know, but a vast amount of it happens via email. And so I would say it does not mean that you're never going to be able to have those relationships and you're never going to be able to get those things, because you can build something just as strong that way.
Can I tack something on here that I think is important before you answer, Heather, and maybe you can address this too. Someone asked a great question about trust. Someone, I think it's a librarian, a faculty member, asked them to buy a manuscript fragment from a dealer that they later found out was known in the trade that for breaking up books. So especially, it's COVID, maybe there are maybe it's impossible to meet a dealer in person right now anyway. So how do you do that? And how do you also know that this dealer is trustworthy?
I mean, I would say, so just quickly to go back to the librarian from the small institution who's not coming to the fairs, and like, I work with a lot of librarians who I've never met, who never come to the fairs, who got in touch with me, you know, by writing me, usually because they saw something online and then went to my website and then inquired about that item, but also said, you know, this is what we do here, and if you ever have anything, please let me know. And I try to be one of the dealers who, instead of writing back and saying like it is sold, writes back and says it is sold. What else, you know, how can I help you? What are you know, what kind of things do you look for, to see if there's some overlap between the kind of thing I do and what they do, and if we might be able to, you know, if I might be able to feed them stuff occasionally, or at least keep them in mind. Like Charlotte was saying, you know, you can be human with people, and even a lot of even though the fairs often loom very large because, you know, they're this very intense sort of situation where everyone's eating and drinking and talking, and the fact is, most of the librarians who stop by my booth at fairs, I didn't meet at fairs. I met because they bought something from an ex libris list or out of a catalog or online. And then we started up an email correspondence, and it may have been years before like our paths actually crossed in real life. And they said, oh, hi, you know, we've never met, but I am this person you write to 3 times a year. And like, we have these, you know, we bought these things. So you should never feel like you can't forge relationships with booksellers. I will say you can't forge relationships with all booksellers because some booksellers just are not good at that. Like they just don't make it a priority. Like they'll sell you a book if you want the book, but they're not really quoters, you know? I mean, they're just, they put stuff online and whoever buys it and that's it. But many other booksellers like really are, their whole business, like mine, is built around trying to have strong relationships with the people that you're selling to, even if you're not selling to them constantly, but you know that there's a thread there that never drops between their interests and yours, and you're trying to keep that alive. And then the part that you were just talking about, would you just quickly remind me?
So that is, and I think that there are so many good questions, and I'm trying to sort of like cram them all into 1 or 2, but it's impossible. So I just thought it was helpful and kind of important to address the issue of trust.
How do you know if a dealer is reputable? I mean, there are a couple, I mean, you know, as we all know, like no method is completely foolproof, but there are some very strong things that you can do. First of all, you know, the ABAA does have a code of ethics and a fairly, you know, fairly stringent application process. So if someone is an ABA member, you know, at the very minimum that if you have any trouble, there is recourse for that. I mean, there is something larger that person is responsible to. But I would say that, so, I mean, yeah, I think you should, certainly for like big ticket items, I would pay close attention, and I wouldn't buy it from some, you know, faceless egg on eBay, unless I were really, really confident that it was absolutely as described and it was okay. But I also think you can tell a great deal about a bookseller from their descriptions, often by plugging things into, you know, Google text. You can tell if they just pulled something off Wikipedia and used that as their description. You can tell if they plagiarized another dealer's description. You can tell, I mean, a reputable bookseller, especially one who's handling, you know, unique or complicated material, is going to write all those descriptions themselves. Like that is going to be like something that they work on. That's part of what they're providing, is their research, their, you know, their correct citing of the bibliographies. All of that is part of what they are providing. And so I think that by certainly going to their website or looking at their listings, and, you know, I think usually if you read through someone's listings, you can get a pretty clear sense of whether this is an amateur, like, you know, just kind of like scanning barcodes, like in their kid's room for like a hobby or whatever, or if it's someone who is like trying seriously to describe things correctly. But it's tricky. As you know, every online marketplace has its own protections or lack of them. And so it can be like, I actually had this week, an old customer wrote me and was like, can I just get your advice on something? And I was like, sure. And he was like, so I bought this signed book on eBay. And I was already like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing these things? It's signed by J.D. Salinger. No, it's not. No, it's not. Absolutely not. No, it's not. And so anyhow, it was not in fact signed by J.D. Salinger. And, you know, he managed to get it back because he said the condition isn't what I expected, which is what you have to do for eBay to get your money back. But if he had written back and been like, this is forged, eBay would have washed their hands of it. You know, so you kind of have to be conscious of like what your exit strategy is going to be in the event you do make a mistake.
I think that was a really great answer. And so we have 5 minutes left. And I think I'm gonna
we didn't get through like all these questions. We don't even know.
I know.
Librarian goes to dinner with a bookseller and the bookseller pays. Does the librarian have to buy a book, Charlotte? No, we all know the answer to this question.
No.
I
actually want to ask one question that got the most thumbs up, and that is, and I'm going to ask it for both of you. What is your biggest yay and biggest nay? So favorite thing versus pet peeve when working with a bookseller or a librarian. And I want to put in one other question here. Is there anything people should be doing differently? Like, definitely don't do the pet peeve during COVID.
Oh,
Trying to tack in an excellent question from Kate Midas.
Yes, I saw that one about COVID. I would just say, you know, should you just reach out and say, you know, can I ship it now? When can I ship it? If I can ship it, are you back in the building? Is the biggest question, right? I am every day. Thank God. But it's very different across the rest of the country. So an institution by institution differs. So I would say, you know, it's a pandemic, in case anyone hadn't noticed. We can be a little bit more honest about stuff by that and just be like, what is going on? You know, I can't even have things that local dealers have, you know, be like, oh, it's fine, I'll drop it off. I'm like, you won't actually even be allowed physically into the building, you know? So no, that's a big no. So I think just be very sort of upfront and say, you know, if somebody's already bought something, you may well have to be willing to send it to their apartment if that's allowed, or their house, right? And that depends on whether they're allowed to or not. The other one is you may have to hold on to it for a really long time. You know, and so then you're going to have to get into a conversation with them. Some institutions have a rule that they will not pay anyone until they've physically received it. So that's where you're going to have a lot of those kind of conversations, very transparent about that. And different institutions, I'm sure, are like putting into place very different kind of, oh my God, you know, depending on when their academic year or their financial year was, that may not have affected them so much. But considering it's November, we're probably going to be in this until March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, maybe January of next year, the year after even. I think it behooves everybody to sort of just be very clear about this kind of, you know, what does this mean? You know, can I be paid? Do I have to ship it? What does that mean? Et cetera, and just be very clear about those things. So I guess that my biggest yay and my biggest nay, I don't know if I'm going to answer this properly. I really love working with booksellers. I like to be honest. I like to be as honest as I can. I like to be as transparent as I can. There are going to be things I don't tell people, and we all need some mystery around us, right? I like to have that back. I like it when people say, you know, if Heather says to me, Charlotte, I need an answer in the next 12 hours, or I need the answer, like, you know, I know that there's somebody else who, you know, or whatever it is. I just like to be able to, so I can be like, all right, I'm going to go to the stacks, or I can make that decision and say, you know what, that's fine. Offer it to them. I like that kind of level of transparency, because I have a lot of demands on my time, and sometimes I need to be pushed to make a decision. And so that's really what I appreciate about when people can be as honest with me as I will be, and we'll push back a little bit. And if I say, can you hold it? How long do you want me to hold it for? You know, I'll be like 6 months, and I'll be like, you got 60 minutes, and it'll be like, okay, you know. So I like that. I also like it when people don't necessarily, you know, as Heather said, I may have bought one thing that was a certain thing from you before. It doesn't mean I'm going to buy another 10 when you get them. And an understanding of that my collecting will change and it will morph. And so people who are still offering me the same things, even though I've clearly said, yeah, I'm not interested in that. I bought that specific thing for this reason. As I said, 5 years later, you're still offering the same kind of things. That's a peeve, because it's just a waste of your time. It's a waste of my time too. And so that's kind of the ways in which I operate. But I like to be able to be as, you know, as honest as I can be, sometimes to a fault. Sorry.
Well, this is a candid conversation. That's why what we're going to do is just to tell. I will say, like Charlotte, what I most like about librarians, the ones who are just straightforward and open, and who tell me, like, it's the beginning of my fiscal year and I'm not buying anything big. Like, so, or my predecessor had this like insane budget, but actually I don't have that budget. So I am not going to be buying the kind of things that, that he bought. That to me is like a fantastic moment where I'm just like, thank you for not wasting my time, for not making me feel like, oh, I have to constantly be pitching this kind of material. And why don't they buy it? Why don't they want it? Because they're never going to buy it. So don't, if you have that material, pitch it elsewhere. Don't bother. Yeah. I also, in terms of pet peeves, I would say putting things on hold or taking things off the floor at a major book fair, unless you are really, really, really serious in consideration, and doing that for long periods of time. If please, librarians need to understand that booksellers work really hard for those weekends when they have to make a lot of money, and to have stock locked up kind of in this sort of casual way on like, oh no, I don't sell that, don't do that. Like, and booksellers, of course, have to learn to be more assertive and say like, I will be happy to put this on hold till tomorrow morning, but then I'm putting it back in the case because here we are. And like, I can't do this. And a lot of booksellers don't do that, and then instead get eaten up by resentment and bitterness, which is not a good look, right? So you don't want to do that. But be considerate. Think about that. Also, it's totally fine, of course, to ask for a discount on a particular item. You can always ask, but ask yourself, why am I asking? Like, do I need this discount to make this purchase work? If the answer is no, I just do it for sport, because like I just like to see like how low I can get it. That is a really bad strategy for you as a librarian. It is incredibly exhausting for the person on the other end who has to constantly like, try to keep some margin of profit into the item, or risk alienating you entirely by being like, I'm not giving any discounts to you because you're, it's one of those things. It's like, learn. If you're going to do that, like make sure there's a reason for it, because I certainly don't mind. I don't mind anyone asking if there's, if you can always ask, but then be prepared to take no gracefully and not in a, sort of passive aggressive, well, wasn't that good a book anyway, kind of like whatever, like, please,
I didn't want it anyway.
I didn't want it. It wasn't even good. Like, okay. Yeah, it's like, it's like dating or whatever. Like you can shoot your shot, but then like, respect the reply and like move on. So yeah, librarians who could constantly dig for discounts without any apparent reason, just because they feel like somehow they're being more professional that way. It's not a great look. So those are pet peeves, I guess I would say. But I mean, most librarians are like a pleasure, to deal with. They're not always on top of their email, but then their email is insane. And that's one thing that I think booksellers need to understand more about librarians, honestly, is that like we tend to think like, we put so much work into cataloging something and photographing it, and we're so excited and we present it. And then, there's just like silence. And it's because the librarian, like that is not, they did not just spend 48 hours working on that book, like, and they're not going to devote the next 48 hours to it. Like they have so much else. They're like teaching a class. They have to like go sub in at the desk. There's a leak. They have to go meet with a donor. They have to, they have to do all this stuff. Like if they can even read their email, they're super lucky, right? So, so you have to just like learn to temper your expectations for like, response.
Well, I think that this has been a really great conversation. We could probably keep going for another half an hour. I will tell everyone that I did check, no more results are in, so you didn't miss anything by tuning out. And I think that it's really good that we all just spent some time together in a candid conversation. So thank you so much to Charlotte and Heather. This was a pleasure. It was really great to learn from you, to laugh a little bit. I have saved the questions and we do hope to do this again. So thank you also to everyone that tuned in, that asked questions, and please do join us again for another event with BSA Online. So good evening, good night, and see you all soon. Thanks.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.